Welcome back to the Faith and Focus podcast, your trusted companion for OCR A-Level Religious Studies revision. I'm Laura and today's episode is all about sexual ethics. Sexual ethics is one of the most culturally and morally relevant areas of the ethics course. It challenges us to consider how we make moral decisions about relationships, sex, marriage and gender in a society that's always changing. So here's what we're going to look at in today's episode. Number 1, what is sexual ethics? Number 2, key issues, premarital sex, homosexuality and marriage. And then the next sections will be each of your normative ethical theories applied to sexual ethics. So we'll start with natural law, then we'll look at situation ethics, then we'll look at Kantian ethics, and then we'll look at utilitarianism. Then we'll look at a revision strategy, and then we'll end the podcast. So let's get going. So segment 1, what is sexual ethics? So sexual ethics deals with moral issues surrounding sex and human relationships. Key questions include, is sex only morally acceptable within marriage? Should procreation be the main purpose of sex? And how do different ethical theories view homosexuality or contraception? This area touches on deeply personal topics, but also draws on major ethical frameworks to analyse real-world dilemmas. Ethical views on sex can reflect broader assumptions about human nature, duty, love, happiness, and society. So segment 2 then, let's look at key issues. Number 1, we're going to look at premarital sex. Number 2, we're going to look at homosexuality. And number 3, we're going to look at marriage and fidelity. And we're going to look at how natural law, situation ethics, Kantian ethics, and utilitarianism apply to each one. So as a brief overview, for premarital sex, natural law would say that it's wrong because it's outside marriage and not for procreation. Situation ethics would say it's permitted if it expresses agape love. Kantian ethics would say it's acceptable only if it's part of a committed, respectful relationship. Utilitarianism would say it's permissible if consensual and causes no harm. Homosexuality, natural law would condemn it as non-procreative. Situation ethics would accept it as long as it's a loving relationship. Kantian ethics would say it's permissible if partners are treated as ends, i.e. that they both value each other and it's not for a purpose of using each other. And utilitarianism would say it's justified by mutual pleasure and happiness. Number 3, marriage and fidelity. Natural law says marriage is necessary for moral, sex and social order. Situation ethics says it's not essential if love and commitment are present. Kantian ethics says marriage represents respect and duty. And utilitarianism says it's valued if it promotes happiness and well-being. From the Church of England, we've got a quote that says, quote, Christian sexual ethics teaches that sex has meaning within a loving, permanent and exclusive relationship, end quote. Segment 3 then, natural law and sexual ethics. We're going to look at this in a bit more detail. So Thomas Aquinas' natural law theory is absolutist and deontological. We've said this before. So it claims that moral laws can be discovered through reason by understanding human nature and God's purpose. So in regards to sexual ethics, natural law says that sex must align with its telos of procreation within marriage, and any act not open to procreation, for example using contraception or homosexual acts, are immoral. So the primary precepts that are relevant is reproduction, preservation of society, and the nurturing of children in families. So Thomas Aquinas says, quote, every emission of semen in a way that generation cannot follow is contrary to the good of man, end quote. And some modern support for that, we've got Pope Paul VI in Humanae Vitae, his document that he wrote in 1968, reinforced this view, stating that every sexual act must remain open to the transmission of life. So strengths, it's clear and consistent moral rules, and it upholds traditional views on marriage and the family. Weaknesses, it lacks compassion or understanding in certain social contexts, and it's too focused on biology, so it makes sex about procreation alone rather than all the other things that it's actually about in a loving relationship. So next section we'll look at situation ethics. So Joseph Fletcher's situation ethics is relativist and teleological. So it holds that only one moral rule is absolute, and that is agape, or selfless unconditional love. So no matter what situation you are in, it must be assessed to maximise love. So if we apply that to sexual ethics, we could say that homosexuality, premarital sex, adultery, even polyamory, they are all acceptable under situation ethics if they express love and avoid harm. And no act is inherently right or wrong, it's only the consequences that matter. So it's not wrong to be, or it's not inherently wrong to be bigamous, it's only the outcome of that matters. So if that causes hurt and pain, then it makes it immoral. So, quote, love is the only universal, but love is not something we have or are, it is something we do, end quote. So, a case study, Joseph Fletcher uses the example of a woman who has sex with a prison guard to escape and return to her family. So he says that that is the most loving thing to do because it enables that woman to leave a horrible situation. Strengths of situation ethics in regards to sexual ethics: it's empathetic and it thinks about human need, and it adapts to diverse and evolving social norms. Weaknesses: it can be subjective and can lead to moral chaos, and it lacks clear moral boundaries. So William Barclay is a scholar who argued that while situation ethics sounds compassionate, it does actually give people too much moral autonomy and can justify unethical behaviour in the end. Okay, next section, we've got Kantian Ethics. Kantian Ethics are deontological, based on rational duty and categorical imperative. On sexual ethics, Kant taught that sex must always be within a framework of mutual respect, and using someone as a means to pleasure degrades their dignity. And moral sex is only within marriage where mutual obligation and equality are present. So, quote, sexual desire is not directed to the person but to the sex, end quote. So an example, Kant is critical of casual sex and prostitution. He sees that as commodifying the human body and using it for something that is not with this end result of treating each other with dignity and respect. So strengths for Kantian ethics then: it upholds personal dignity and rational autonomy, and it resists exploitation and objectification, as we've said about prostitution. Weaknesses: it is really rigid, right? There is no wiggle room in Kantian ethics, and it's reluctant to accept anything that is a genuine expression of love but is not within a marriage. So a scholar, Christine Korsgaard, a modern Kantian, argues that mutual consent and dignity can exist in non-marital sex so long as the parties are treated as ends. Okay, and segment 6 is utilitarianism. So Bentham and John Stuart Mill, they are consequentialists, focusing on outcomes rather than rules. So the acts maximise pleasure and minimise pain as a general rule. So in sexual ethics, all acts, so premarital sex, homosexuality, polyamory, they're all acceptable if they increase happiness and reduce suffering. And Bentham's hedonic calculus includes criteria like duration, intensity, purity and extent to try and minimise that pain. So a quote from Bentham: nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure, end quote. And a quote from Mill: it is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied, end quote. So Mill focuses on higher pleasures that elevate love and meaningful relationships over casual pleasure seeking. So it is ultimately about the higher pleasure, not just, intimate or immediate satisfaction. So strengths of this argument: it's flexible, it's context sensitive, And it also reflects democratic values and individual rights. Weaknesses, you could end up justifying unethical practices if it turns out that the majority benefit. And pleasure is a difficult thing to quantify. So it's a subjective thing. So how do you know whether you're bringing the most pleasure to the most people if it's something that's so subjective? So a criticism, Bernard Williams argued that utilitarianism may alienate individuals and it ignores justice for minorities in favour of the minority happiness. So you could argue that things like racism would serve the majority and therefore minorities have no say. Okay, segment 7, we've got an essay planning grid. So if you create a grid with the following columns: ethical theory, key thinker and quote, view on premarital sex, view on homosexuality, view on marriage and fidelity, strengths and weaknesses, you then fill in the rows for natural law, situation ethics, Kantian ethics and utilitarianism, and then you can map across. I think what I would do then is colour code which ones agree for certain issues, which ones disagree for certain issues. Challenge task: write a paragraph evaluating the view that love alone should guide sexual behaviour, and use Kant and Fletcher to construct your argument. Okay, that's it for today's episode of the Faith and Focus podcast. And it also marks the final episode of the Religion and Ethics series. So we've covered everything from ethical theories to applications to real-world moral issues. So next time, we're going to start with the Developments in Christian Thought unit, which will begin with Augustine's teaching on human nature. So that's going to look at original sin, grace, and human will. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning, and keep learning. Bye!